there is the big question that you and I had talked about in our initial discussion, which is how are people thinking about artificial intelligence right now? It seems like what's actually going on in the industry from people like yourself at Mila and at research labs is very different from what the general public comes to understand about where the industry is and where it's going. Can we talk about that dichotomy at the start?
Yes, for sure. I think the idea of artificial intelligence in the general public has evolved quite a lot in the past few years after the introduction of ChatGPT. My guess is that before ChatGPT, probably the main understanding of artificial intelligence in the general public was quite influenced by science fiction and robots, films, etc. And I think, especially for those who use ChatGPT and similar tools, I think that has become the the main understanding of AI. And when we see AI in the media, what people my impression is that what people think immediately of is this kind of chatbots. So chatbots, text-based chatbots. And if you compare this to kind of like the research community, I think the understanding of AI is much broader. I think I wouldn't say it's well defined. Different people have different understandings, but probably it encompasses, you know, a wider and more diverse set of tools, which can range from, simple predictive models trained on a small data set that, it can do uh, some tasks, some predictive tasks, some generative modeling, like robotics, without necessarily being like agents that interact with people. I think that understanding of AI is much wider.
Do we need like a very strict definition or terminology of understanding AI in general? Like for example, when pursuing research, you're usually confined to certain parameters on what you're actually researching. Does that hinder or benefit artificial intelligence having those predefined strict terms, or is that maybe should there be a looser understanding?
A very good question. I don't think it strictly goes in either direction, like it benefits or hinders. I think it can go either way. Um, but I do think that in this particular case, having such a specific understanding of what this technology is for the general public it carries specific consequences, I would say. And I think it it prevents. We can talk more about this if you want, but I think it prevents you know uh, nuanced discussions about the impacts of AI in the world, and what it can do, what it can't do, what are alternatives. I think it carries a lot of weight, because it's like cultural. It becomes like a cultural um, item in people's minds. I think for research, for the research community, it's not that critical. I think there will always be a lot of nuance, and there will be like sub communities discussing specific definitions and specific kind of alternative views. I think with the research community, it's not so problematic. It has specific issues, but I think that the main concern is like the particular understanding that has kind of permeated into the wider community, audience, society.
There's like this shadow on the wall when it comes to talking about artificial intelligence, and it's a pretty big shadow. Large language models and the transformer architectures and stuff. It feels like if you aren't talking about that, if you aren't researching it, if you aren't funding it, then you're just irrelevant. And obviously, this is not the case, but there is something about the the darling of the industry, so to speak, being this enforcer. How does that affect the research community in general, but specifically you, this and correct me where I'm wrong, but maybe this inability to explore other avenues because everybody is so obsessed with, the chatbots and the LLMs and such.
Yeah, well, I think it would be unfair to say it affects me like really badly because I don't work on LLMs in particular, and then I'm massively impacted, and I don't think that would be fair to say. I still consider that I'm in a privileged position just by having a faculty position and working in this field in general. But if as an observer of the trends, what I can see is that for example, when it comes to funding and collaborations with industry and other organizations, there has been a shift from working on a pretty diverse set of tools and having a diverse uh, approach, like diversity of approaches to projects and potential tools and techniques to use and whatnot. Currently, there's an uh, overblown obsession, like you said, with LLMs in particular. Currently, that seems to be the thing to do, and yeah, that diverts funding, that diverts efforts, and more than perceiving it as a particular as it having a particular impact on myself. I think it's just a bit of a waste, I would say, because there's like too much effort on a particular thing. And I hear comments from students, from collaborators saying that's actually hard to contribute something new in certain areas of LLM research on actually on other areas because either there is no interest or there is too many people working on the on the thing. So I think this is problematic because of the lack of, the disproportionate amounts of efforts that go on different things.
The low hanging fruit is completely gone, and so you have to spend more time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to break away from the river that we're on, but I promise I'll circle back to it. So, one of the things that I found so fascinating and so terrifying is just the lack of policy when it comes to, the chatbots right now. It seems like everybody's being affected by it. It seems like it doesn't even seem our environment is being affected by it. And yet, for some particular reason or reasons, we just are not putting policies in place to stop this or mitigate it. The first question I have on this river, or this tangent rather, is when does policy, when is it appropriate to put policy in place? Is it appropriate to put policy in place before, research and application go into practice? How long after research and application is it appropriate to put policy into place? With this, there's a chicken and egg problem that I'm trying to dispel. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an important question as well. First of all, I'm not a policy expert, so I'll speak from my own intuitions here. I think it's important to distinguish between policy uh, that impacts research, so policy about what research should be done and what research should not be done, and then all other policy about the adoption and the more like the stage where technology and that research reaches society. When it comes to research policy, I'm thinking, for example, all the guidelines and regulations around, for example, like medical research, which there's a lot of regulation around it, and human research with human subjects and with animals and all that. And I think that's very important to have. I think that has prevented a lot of having this regulation in most places in the world has prevented like harms and has prevented research directions that could be dangerous. And of course, it could be improved. We could have those discussions, but I would say that at least the question of why not having this kind of regulations and policies for AI research as well, I think that's a legit question, and I don't think we discuss this often enough. So why not? Why not having some guidelines or regulation about what AI research directions should be kind of uh, done. I don't know if it's done or not. It shouldn't be a binary, but how, what should be the constraints and the things to take into account to do certain AI research projects. And then everything else, which is kind of like the AI adoption, the stage at which technology reaches society. Your question was whether it should be done before or after and so on. I think by definition, like this kind of policy, it cannot anticipate a lot what's going to happen, and it's just really hard it's I think it's unreasonable to expect that policy would anticipate like technologies. That's just really hard. So I think policymakers need to be like ready to adjust as quickly as possible to the fast evolving technology. But for better or worse, I think it has to be like this with the current societies that we have. But it's a challenge because technology moves really fast.
100%. Yeah, it's an important point where the policymakers may inappropriately impute policy that prevents research or slows down applications, and so you don't want to do that. But at the same time, if you don't put policy in place, then those commercial applications may bring harm to a society.
Also, if I may say one thing about that, I think it's also important to see this relationship between like technology, research, innovation, and policy, regulation, etc., as a kind of like synergistic thing more than I think that this understanding of the more policy or the more regulation, the less innovation, or the most innovation or only innovation can only happen without regulation. I think we need to break free from this because it's it's not entirely true. I think specific regulation can encourage certain types of innovation and research uh, more than prevent it. I think, um, yeah, I think there's a way to think about regulation in a way that is not like as a constraint to innovation, but rather as a way to let it grow and go in the directions that benefit society.
So regulation, and what I'm understanding from you is that regulation is less of like a constraining guardrail and more of like a focus.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you say more about that? Because my follow-up question before you said your really important point was um, to make policy, to have policymakers that are really technically minded, or to create the phone call or the communication line between policymakers and folks like yourself who are at the forefront of research, a really strong communication line. But now that we're saying that, innovation and research and policymaking, I don't remember what you said. It can be synergistic or it is synergistic.
I think it could be synergistic. I don't think it truly is at the moment. I think like I agree with you, there's not enough communication channels between researchers and policymakers. There can be more. And I think researchers should be, or at least some researchers should be involved in policy making and in establishing those channels. And I think if that is done well, if there's enough communication, enough in both directions, I think that's when it can become like synergistic. Because and why I say that it can be synergistic is because at the end of the day, there are limited resources to the research. So if we don't put any constraints around it, it's gonna go in a certain direction, probably driven by markets, profit interests of certain players that have a lot of power and control in which direction things will go. Um, and even leaving aside the fact that this could lead to harmful impacts, the way regulation could work is that, well, if it actually if policy identifies problems and potential problems and avenues and establishes certain guardrails and constraints, then that can help actually redirect all those efforts and resources into areas and directions that are more beneficial for society. right? And this wouldn't happen actually without the regulation. So that's why I think that there can be more innovation on certain things if regulation is put in place, because otherwise all those resources would be funneled into something else.
I'm not trying to dabble in conspiracy right now, so I'm not even going to go down that thread. But it does seem like the talk of regulation being constraining is very convenient if you are focusing on commercial applications and you feel like regulation would be constraining. It just seems like the perfect band-aid over that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
that's interesting.
I mean, I think it's a card that is played by like big corporations. I mean, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to say that there are lobbies, and not only in AI technology, like we can think of like fossil fuels and fossil fuel industry and tobacco industry and other industries. They depend on being able to influence policymakers to at the very least slow down regulation.
And so, my next question was going to be if you could talk to governments and get them to pass one policy regarding AI in the environment, what would it be? A very generic question. We can answer that, but I want to ask a pre-question before. Is that even a worthwhile endeavor? Because we already just said that lobbyists are going to try to slow down that policy and regulation and counteract it. Is there something about AI in the environment that we're not considering? Like, for example, telling more people that, hey, when you're using these chatbots, you're actually every query is contributing to burning more water and releasing more carbon, killing more trees, etc. Can it be more of like a grassroots social thing, or does it have to be top down from the government?
I think it has to be both. Like most changes in societies, neither top down by itself is enough, nor bottom up is enough by itself. I think both efforts are necessary, um, for better or worse. And yeah, I don't know if the question is which one policy. I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer, but it would be something about resource usage, like you said. Um, so about energy, about water resources and so on, or it would probably be something about you know, privacy and the access and control of data in general, which is, I think, behind a lot of these kind of technologies, and that's currently quite unconstrained, at the root of a bunch of problems.
Why do you say that privacy and data are more at the back of these problems?
Well, that's a complex topic, but it's on the fact that um, a lot of the technology that we see these days revolves around access and control of data. I mean, if we talk about like social media, but if we talk about like big tech products, if we talk about AI is what it is thanks to access and control of large amounts of data. And there is a race of, gathering and accessing and controlling more and more data from people, it belongs to people, and this is possible because there is little regulation around, um, yeah, what can be done with people's data. I think yeah, that's an issue. There's more regulation in Europe, but it's imperfect. So I think that's in the back of a lot of the technologies that we see these days, including AI.
I want to go back to climate change because there's this issue that people don't see climate change and then they can't do anything about it. And I know that you helped create certain visuals to make climate change feel real to people. First of all, where did that idea come from? If you can say more about that, and where do we go from there? What are your ideas to go forth from that?
So the idea of using AI to help visualize or think and be able to empathize with the impacts of climate change. Um, I think that's been around for a while. I contributed to this project called This Climate Does Not Exist, which is a tool where people can, go enter an address that they care about, like your home or where you grew up or your work, and actually see, for example, the flooding on that location on a photo taken from the street. I have to say that I wasn't involved in the inception of that idea. I joined the project about halfway. Um, but yeah, it essentially it is inspired by the fact that I think you've mentioned this, like perceptions of climate change are quite specific in the sense that it's a complex problem because of the temporal and spatial aspects. Temporal meaning that the impacts of climate change occur and evolve in a time scale that is kind of like inhuman, right? Like we are not able to directly see with our eyes in a few days how climate change, especially in the past, has been changing slowly. Now it's accelerating, um, and spatially as well, in the sense that what uh, what these impacts can be might have this impact, the impacts of climate change. In other words, the impacts of climate change might happen like far away from us, which doesn't make the problem um, like lighter. So this creates like a psychological distance, which is a temporal distance, it's a geographical distance, and it's an emotional distance as well, because you're like, okay, it might happen to other people. So it's hard to really grasp it. And so people have been thinking, it's not just us, like a lot of people in climate communications have been thinking about how to talk about climate change, how to convey these complex ideas that kind of go beyond our usual perception of the world. So through storytelling, through visualizations, and then given the advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence to generate images, we thought that machine learning could actually be used to create these visualizations that otherwise we would not have access to.
And correct me where I'm wrong, but artificial intelligence is also being used to speed up climate tech discoveries and new materials and breakthroughs and such. Can you say more on that front? Are you involved in any of these projects, and what are you discovering in this climate tech and AI intersection?
Yeah, that actually happens to be more the focus of my current research. So machine learning for scientific applications, and in particular, what you've mentioned, so the facilitating the discovery of new materials for sustainability applications, facilitating the discovery of new drugs, in particular antibiotics discovery. Um, and the way machine learning can help in different ways, but one of the ways in which I'm most involved is in the particular task of exploring the large, very, very, very large search space of new molecules or new materials. So it turns out that the the amount of conceivable candidates that we could imagine for both drugs and materials is just huge. It's so huge that there are more than atoms in the universe, more than grains of sand in the beach, whatever metaphor we use to do this comparison. It's just like tiny. There's just a lot more. So there's no way we could design a, a tool, a machine, or whatever that would exhaustively explore the entirety of all candidates that we could conceive for example, for drug discovery. So one has to think of alternatives. It's like we cannot explore the whole thing. Can we design at least tools and methods that can explore this space in a more efficient way, so that we don't need to explore the entire space? It's like if you need to find, like, some kind of treasure in a big castle. and it's huge, and you don't have time to go room by room and check all the rooms. Um, Perhaps instead you have some uh, intuitions or knowledge that will kind of make you follow and check specific rooms that are more promising. So it's like, can we actually build machine learning algorithms that can go to those promising regions of the molecular space, those promising rooms, and check there, learn from what you see in those rooms, in those molecular regions, and then kind of go to the next promising part. So it's quite an open challenge, but we are making advances in that. And these are called generative models, but are quite different to the chatbot generative AI thing that people are used to know. So this is something like coming back to the beginning of the conversation. Now, if I say, "Oh yeah, I work on generative machine learning for drug discovery," people might think, "Oh, actually, so it's Gen AI, so it's a chatbot that outputs some stuff." It's actually not that. So it's like very narrow in the sense of domain constrained tools that are able to explore molecules and only molecules. They cannot talk to you. They cannot do therapy with you. They cannot do anything. But they are good at exploring new molecules.
Just to preface, we are not using ChatGPT for drug discovery. That is not happening.
Some people are doing it, but my take on this is that that's uh, perhaps not the best approach to it.
This is the thing. So, what is the pipeline between research and real world applications? So, you make a breakthrough tomorrow. And, well, first of all, let me just ask you, when you make that breakthrough, what does that breakthrough look like? What are you like? Will you find something and then do you have to publish a paper? And then are there certain logistical steps that take it away from actually being some real world application? The reason I ask this because this is in your face day to day, but for folks that are not in the research realm or just in the AI realm in general, they have no clue how these things happen, and so they can only consume headlines. Would you be able to maybe not give away the secret sauce, but just break down a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes?
Well, the first thing to say is that unfortunately, breakthroughs are not a day-to-day thing. I wish, I wish we had a breakthrough finding every day. It's
Ah,
actually
that's why you need to use ChatGPT. Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It's more of a long-term process. And in our particular domain, it's actually like true breakthroughs, uh, or I would even try to avoid the word breakthrough, like true, moments of progress and discoveries and moments of, okay, this we've made progress on this particular problem. It would happen through interdisciplinary collaborations. And I can explain, like, if I'm working on drug discovery and in particular antibiotics discovery, I think as a machine learning researcher, I could only make meaningful and significant contributions to this if I engage in strong and tight collaborations with, for example, biologists and chemists, um, and have, regular communications in which I make a conscious effort to learn what they need. They make a conscious effort to learn what we can do with our machine learning tools. And then after that, we work and work and work and explore options. We do experiments. We train machine learning models. We get some results, get back, refine, return. And then one day it's like, oh, this actually seems to work. And you share your experiment, you write a paper, but your question is about how it translates to society. That's a much longer process, for better or worse. So you usually the main output from academia, from research, is to write a paper, try to convince the research community that this is a worthwhile tool or technique or method or discovery, whatever it is. And if it's truly interesting and impactful, it will be picked up by people who are in a position to use it. That can be companies, that can be governments, that can be other scientists. It depends on the area. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And it kind of sets up the next question, which is you're an advocate of open science, yes?
Yeah,
Now, one of the things that I've always been hearing is when we make artificial intelligence, again, using the generic term,
yeah.
but when we make AI models open source, then they're in the hands of bad actors. And so naturally the question becomes, if you're an advocate for open science, how do you balance sharing the research and then also the fact that the tech could be misused or the research could be misused in some way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the sake of the argument, let's spell out the alternative view first of saying, well, because code and tools and science and technology can end up in the bad hands, then we should do it behind closed doors. And my answer to this, which I disagree, and my answer to this is that um, most often, and this is based on experience and previous cases, even when things are done behind closed doors, which actually happens quite often, not because of fear of it ending up in bad actors, but it actually happens from some companies, for example, often adopt that approach of doing things behind closed doors to protect their profit, right? And we can even think of what has happened with LLMs. At some point, this big company started to develop these tools, closed code, closed source. And what happened? I mean, it's just a delay. It's just a delay of the speed at which it reach those bad actors. So the same would happen with dangerous technology. You can do it behind closed doors. That has absolutely no guarantees that it will reach those bad actors. So if we depart from this and we assume that sooner or later that can actually happen, then perhaps we should do the development open source so that more people have eyes on how this technology is being developed. There's more people kind of potentially auditing it, and more people potentially developing the tools that would counter the potential misuse of code technology and tools.
Right. It seems like another card that is very convenient to play, which is let's make everything closed source, and then that way the bad actors won't get their hands on it. And in reality, it just takes a little bit of thinking to realize the bad actors are going to have their hands on it anyway.
Yeah.
And, it's just a matter of time. And so if you build in the open, then you're more likely to not prevent it. I don't think you can ever prevent it, but develop tools in order to mitigate the bad actors.
Yeah, I think it's really, really hard to develop things truly secretly. I think perhaps, the US government has managed to do certain things in secret in their military. I was reading recently one example in which the NASA people found about the telescope that had been developed by the US military for surveillance, and it was much more powerful than what the NASA people had. But that's very rare. It's very, very rare.
I'm going to ask you an annoying question right now, so just get ready.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on artificial general intelligence? Now, I'm not going to ask you if it's going to come. I'm not going to ask you if you're working on it. I'm just going to ask you what your thoughts are. Because for me, I find that most conversations about it usually go nowhere. But I just want to know your perspective.
Yeah. Sure. My answer to that is that when I hear when I hear the conversations about artificial general intelligence, I usually see or perceive an understanding of intelligence that is very, very narrow, and it's very, very biased to a particular type of intelligence that has been historically developed, and under, even I would say even, you know, the historical roots of this understanding of intelligence are actually quite problematic in terms of many things, but for example, it can be traced back to to ideas of dominance and control, and even eugenicist approaches to intelligence. So my answer is like, what do we even mean by artificial general intelligence? Like, what is that? I still have to hear a convincing definition that is actually meaningful, and that's actually not problematic for one reason or another. So I think we should strive to maybe redefine what we mean by intelligence, and it ends up being this AGI, I think, ends up being like a buzzword, like an objective that it's unattainable, and it's not well defined.
Well, let me thank you for that. I'm going to double click on something you said, but let me just take a step back because I realized that what I said kind of sounded rude before. When I say the conversation goes nowhere, I mean the conversations from AI practitioners that they just say AGI is going to change everything and it's going to usher in utopia and we're going to have flying cars and 3D printers for foods. And my response is, well, what do you mean by AGI? And there's barely ever like a solid definition. The
Yeah,
usual definition is like, human intelligence in a machine. Okay, well, what do you mean by human intelligence? And I'm not going to go in this direction, but I'll just say it. They usually just procrastinize human intelligence to like everything that's in the brain, and they forget everything else. It's
yeah.
always really interesting to me. What do you? I want to take a gander back at what you said. Eugenics, control, and dominance when we're talking about intelligence. Can you say more about that? Because that's completely new to me.
Yeah, so I mean the origins of artificial intelligence can be traced back to military applications who have so people coming to artificial intelligence and to these ideas of machines that do things automatically from this perspective of having dominance or and control over things or others. And then that actually becomes the notion of intelligence. Can we control a machine? Can we control a process? Can we dominate this? Can we automate it? And there are the idea of intelligence could be much broader, could be more inspired by the non-human world and nature and animals and plants. Like if we ask, like, in one of these conversations about AGI, and you ask the question like, okay, are are plants intelligent? Are animals intelligent under this definition? Probably the immediate answer would be like, well, no, because then um, AGI, the notion of intelligence under this definition is one of being able to do a lot of things, um, being able to control a lot of processes, to control a lot of tasks. Is this thing of task completion, like dominance, control, while another other notions of intelligence could include like stability and ecology, the idea of being in balance with other organisms, being in synergy with other entities. And these are not things that are kind of incorporated in these notions of intelligence that we often see in AI.
I think OpenAI's stock would crash if people found out that forests, the things like the metastructures that these chatbots and the data centers are killing, are actually more intelligent than the chatbots that they are prescribing to be AGI. Because
Exactly.
forests and like the trees give each other water, and there's a balance in the ecosystem. And like mycelium, for example,
Yeah.
they communicate and it's like there's such elephants can tell whether humans are pregnant, and like they know, they can distinguish like well water from the fresh water, and like they know if they know which elephant it is from the bones and stuff, and same thing for dolphins. And like there's such a disrespect I've found socially and culturally and obviously technologically, with this bias towards not AI, but Chat GPT and its sisters. Like, for some reason, we value these technologies over us and over everything else. And that to me is where AI has destroyed a lot of what makes humans human. It destroyed meaning in some way. It's very sad to me. Anyway,
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it narrows our understanding and view of of intelligence and our position in the world more than expanding it. I agree with you. Like if we were able to think more about, what actually forests, you said it, like animals are able to see, and how there is intelligence and how they exist in the planet, and how they relate to their particular ecology and existence. That would probably help us expand our understanding of intelligence.
I don't mean to go on a rant or whatever, but I just find that whenever we're talking about things like chatbots and such, they bring it up as constant solutions to problems,
Yeah,
and they don't go a step deeper and say, well, why do we need this to have the solution? So, for example, like AI can cure loneliness because lonely people would have something to talk to. But it's like, why are you not, like asking them to go and talk to a human? Oh, well, they don't have any friends. Well, then why are you not giving them the social skills or the opportunities to make friends? Like, why is it always this technology fills in the gap, but it doesn't fill in the gap between you and a human? It actually creates a barrier between you and other humans. And we continue to do this in some way. And I think
yeah, yeah.
not AI, but ChatGPT and its sisters are just like prime examples of it.
Well, technology in general, like a lot of the technological advances, quote unquote, are meant to solve problems that are created by technology itself. So we can take a step back and look at the root sources of certain problems and rethink whether uh, more technology is needed or actually perhaps less. And it's not about, technology is good and bad. Like, it's that's simplistic. It's about rethinking what is the interaction of our societies with technology, and where more technology can actually be more harmful, and where it could be beneficial.
I think that's the last thing I'm going to ask you on this AI front. We're going to go into more esoteric but fun questions. So I appreciate the entire conversation. What is your advice to young people? If you could talk to yourself in the past, what age would you go back to and what would you say?
Advice to young people. Great question. I don't like giving advice, but if you ask me, I think, yeah, we're talking about we've tackled this. I would say that, actually talking to people. You said this, talking to people and reading books. Yeah,
What books are on your mind right now? What is your relationship to reading? Are you on a Kindle? Do you prefer physical books? And then what interests you right now?
I prefer physical books. I have an e-reader that I also use. If I have a chance to get an ebook, I also read it sometimes on an e-reader, but there's nothing like touching the paper and the pages of a book. Um, and I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of politics, economy, philosophy, science as well. Science that might be outside my specific day-to-day research, sometimes kind of tangential. But yeah, a lot of nonfiction.
I'll make sure to ask you about politics for the next episode, but I'll save the
Okay.
questions for now. If you had a magic wand and you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
Right now, it would be stopping wars.
No follow-up questions for that one. And the last question I have is, what gives you hope in the world?
I mean, I'm a hopeful person. I'm an optimistic by nature, so I don't easily lose that. What gives me hope is that despite all the adversities and problems in the world, um, there's still so much beauty in everything, and people getting together. I think the potential of the collective, when people get together and work together for for specific goals and for to change the world and to work together to improve our lives. That's just amazing. And I think there's very few things that cannot be done when people get together. So that gives me hope. That's always my approach to things, is like try to think of not what I can do individually, but actually what we can do when we get together.
I love it. Professor, thank you so much for being here. Where can we find you online to follow you and your research? Are you on Instagram? Do you post a lot of TikToks? Like what how can we follow your stuff?
You're hardly going to find me on social media. I can be found on Blue Sky. Um, I can be found in Montreal. And I can be found by email. I have a website, alexhernandezgarcia.com. I try to reply. I get a lot of emails, but I try to reply. And there's nothing like a in-person conversation, but there's a lot of pleasure as well in these discussions, even when it is through a screen, but it's like a human to human conversation.
Well, I must say I do owe you a coffee from last time, so thank you, and I'll make sure to get you back. And Professor, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure talking with you.
It was my pleasure too. Thank you very much.